when the Fertitta family bought the UFC in the early 2000s and installed Dana White as president, mixed martial arts was regulated in one state in the U.S. That would be New Jersey. Atlantic City.
Really? What a bunch of horse shit that line is. I look at it, it's like, how many times do you see, people talking about commentary and, hey, do your homework and stuff like that? And it's like, if you're going to put that out, you better make sure it's right. Mm-hmm. Okay. And in the 2000s, all right, let's say that, no, there was quite a few states that regulated MMA. Okay. The first state that regulated MMA, if you're going to really look at it, was Mississippi. Billy Lyons was the commissioner of Mississippi. He's the first one that ever issued me a license as someone that worked for the state athletic commission. Okay. How about Iowa was another. Alabama, there was a bunch of fights in there. Their commission was, in and out. So it was like, but they did fights there all the time. The same thing. New Jersey was done before the Fertittas were ever, owners of the UFC. UFC 28 was done in New Jersey. That was the first fight ever in the state of New Jersey for the UFC. They had one fight before it, and the UFC was the second MMA show that New Jersey did, and that was UFC 28 that had Randy Couture against Kevin Randleman in the finals in the main event. But to sit there, say that, in the 2000s, and the Fertittas bought the UFC in 2000, at the start of 2000, end of 2000, had their first show was UFC 30, but New Jersey was not the first state to regulate MMA, and it wasn't the only state when they bought it that was regulating MMA. So quit trying to change history. God damn it. Fucking drives me fucking crazy. If you can't get it right, don't fricking say anything.
There comes a lot of responsibility with that play-by-play player. There's a lot. You got guys that are fantastic. I mean, people like to knock Mauro Ronaldo, but the guy's a fucking walking dictionary. The guy...
Encyclopedia.
Encyclopedia, I should say, not dictionary. My apologies. He is someone that has been through the history of it all. He's done Pride. He's done Strike Force. He's done Elite XC. He's done everything. He's done WWE. Like, he's done everything. He knows from, like, people think like, and I'm not, it's not a knock on Ariel Helwani. Ariel Helwani is a big WWE fan. I can tell you right now that no one knows more about WWE than Mauro Ronaldo. Nobody that I fucking have ever met. And I'm not a WWE guy, but I know,
including Podcast Dave.
Podcast Dave doesn't even know, like, Marlo's forgot more things than Podcast Dave's ever known about WWE. That's how he is, just such an encyclopedia, encyclopedia of it. Sean Grande, when he does his intros, he does the research of the city they're in. He does the research of the state they're in. Does the research of what fighters have fought in there. John Anik does a great job as well, and he's made countless posts. And I'm not trying to take a knock at Brenden, but I'm simply saying, like, there's a lot of work that goes into this and making sure that the history of what you were saying is true. And in this situation, it wasn't. But then again, let's go back to Winston Churchill. What did he say? John, what did he say? History is written by the victors.
Absolutely.
The bottom line is the UFC right now is the victors. Dana White, Lorenzo Fertitta, Frank Fertitta, they're the victors, man. They bought it. They're trying to, whether they're trying to rewrite history or whatever it is they're trying to do, they're shaping it. And, and as times goes down the line, they will do more interviews. They'll do more podcasts. They'll do more media interviews, whatever it is.
All that.
And things,
and the people like me that know, we die off.
But let me ask you this, though. Are they doing it on purpose, or are they doing it based off of what they remember? Because, if you tell something so many times, you start to believe it.
Yeah, if you tell a lie enough times.
Well, sometimes that's how they remember it.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not saying that it's not a lie. I'm just simply saying that's how they remember it all happening. So I know it ends up being a lie in the long run, but is it not really meaning to be? It's not. They're not trying to make it a lie.
No, look, I listened to Dana on the Lex Friedman show, and
Lex
and
is
you
a great
could,
interviewer, by the way. Absolutely
he
love his
is.
show.
And you could look and I really enjoyed what he was saying throughout most of it. And you're looking and I go, okay, I remember that, I remember that, I remember that. Like I first met Lorenzo Fertitta at UFC 21. Okay, it was in Des Moines, Iowa. It was a fight that he, along with Glenn Carano, Gina Carano's father,
Played for the Dallas Cowboys, correct?
yes,
Yep.
Flip Homansky, who was the chief medical advisor for the Nevada State Athletic Commission. And look, I could get into the truth of what occurred and how it occurred and what was done and what was dirty and what wasn't. But the truth is, back then, Lorenzo was sitting on the Nevada State Athletic Commission. He was a commissioner. And he came out to watch the UFC because the UFC was trying to become regulated in the state of Nevada. And back then, I know Dana tells the story of, he was with Frank Fertitta, and they see John Lewis in the casino, and Frank Fertitta recognizes John Lewis, he says, and goes over and, they talk to him and end up going to his school. I gave Lorenzo Fertitta John Lewis's phone number and address of his school back at UFC 21. I had dinner with him that night, sat down, explained all the fights, and said, look, this is a guy in Las Vegas. This is the guy, if you want to know about this sport and you want to understand it, go talk to John. Set up, John will show you things. He'll put you in these positions so you'll understand them. Because, at the time, Lorenzo looks, he goes, I don't like the fact that they're hitting people on the ground. Right. And I go, and, back then, my whole thing, look, I understand that. I said, you are someone that comes from the world of boxing. You understand boxing. I go, but you need to understand, we get an idea of fighting from movies. I said, you watch John Wayne in a fight in the movies. John Wayne hits a guy, knocks him to the ground. John Wayne doesn't go over and mount him and start throwing elbows. John Wayne grabs him, picks him up, stands him back up, and punches him again to knock him over again. And he looks at me and goes, yeah. And I go, that's not real fighting. No. And that was just the way it was back then. But I just look at, there's truth to everything. And as you say, people are going to remember their truth. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I totally understand that. And I listen to like what Dana says now, and I have nothing bad to say about anything. And look, Dana's had a huge impact on this sport. But, I heard him on the Lex Friedman, and he was talking about, he was doing, negotiations for Tito Ortiz, and he was trying to bring Chuck Liddell, and the UFC didn't want Chuck Liddell. Chuck Liddell was in the UFC. What are you talking about? He was first in the UFC at UFC 17. Then he fought Jeremy Horn. I mean, he was a fighter. I had referenced how many times, and you're going to sit there and say the UFC didn't want Chuck Liddell. Okay, I understand the way you're saying it, but it comes out like, oh, they didn't think Chuck was a good fighter. They didn't want him. No, that's not exactly what was going on. They were out of money.
That's something's always I've always wanted to, maybe you can give me more input on this, and if you don't feel comfortable, that's fine. But is what happened with the John Lewis thing? Because John Lewis was supposed to be the Joe Silva of the sport, correct?
Yeah.
And
no, they were going to make John Lewis the matchmaker.
Yeah.
For the UFC. And I'll tell you straight out, it was Jeff Blatnick. Joe Silva was a fanboy of the UFC. Okay, and this is before Zuffa.
Not just the UFC. He was a fanboy of Shuto and Rumor Sato.
Dude, he was a fanboy of freestyle fighting. Yeah. Shuto. He loved Rumina Sato, Max Sakurai, all of them. He was just a huge fan. And he was someone that, while the UFC was owned by Semaphore, he was sending them, hey, you guys should do this. He was sending them, emails, because the internet was just, coming up and stuff. And with that, they would send him a poster for, whatever it was. And he kind of, was in this position where they would, he would tell them about a certain fighter. And then Jeff Blatnick, who was a color commentator for the UFC, working along first Bruce Beck and then working with Mike Goldberg, he hired Joe Silva to be his kind of biographer to research material, give him information on fighters and stuff like that. And Joe did a great job with it. And so when the UFC was bought by the Fertittas, they brought me out, they brought Jeff out, and Jeff was the one that suggested to Dana and Lorenzo, hey, you need to talk to Joe Silva. He really knows these fighters. And then, who's Joe Silva? Look, he's this guy, and they bring Joe out and talk, and they gave Joe the job over John Lewis. And, and look, let's be honest, Joe did a great job.
Fantastic.
Did a great job. And so it was, a smart hire by Dana and Lorenzo, or by whichever one decided to make that choice. But yeah, that's how Joe Silva got the job over John Lewis, because John Lewis was supposed to be the matchmaker.
100% agree.